Wow, all this natural light, you would never realize that is so far below freezing outside. Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. It's officially the end of March, which means it is about time to start thinking about all of the books that I have read in the first quarter of 2024. So hard to believe that we're already there, and also so hard to believe that I have read so many books by now in this time. I really didn't think that I was gonna make it this far, but I guess that's what happens when you have 2 international flights to take and you've got time to just get through an entire novel. I'm filming this in the last week of March, which I recognize is still technically part of the first quarter. However, I don't think I'm going to be finishing another book before April 1st, so I figured let's get this going now so I can start thinking about what's ahead for quarter 2. This is going to be a lightning fast round of the 16 books that I managed to read in the first quarter, and I'm doing a lightning round just to see how much I remember about each of them and what my feelings were. So this is going to be a little bit of an experiment for both you and for me. Book number 1, Once Upon a Winter's Eve by Tessa Dare. I won't go into the entire story of how I discovered the Spindle Cove series. You'll have to watch another video to really find that out. But this is a novella that is part of the Spindle Cove series. It does an attempt to try and fill in some of the gaps that I think folks are wondering about between all of the like proper full novels in there. It was okay. I didn't really love the whole vibe of like, oh, here's this person and we're not going to know who the person is, and then suddenly, oh yes, she's the only person that's going to know who the person is, and then runs off with him into the night. Didn't really feel like that link was strong enough for the few pages that this book had. If it had been a bigger, like more proper novel, would have worked out better for me, but it was alright. It was fine. Somehow more fine, though, than the actual next proper Spindle Cove book that I read, A Lady by Midnight by Tessa Dare, with this gloriously uncomfortable cover for, I think, everyone involved here, quite honestly. This book centers around the woman who is the piano teacher in Spindle Cove in this series, and or not piano teacher, the music teacher rather, and her name is Kate, and Kate just believes that she's sort of doomed to a life of spinsterdom because she has this birthmark on her face, and suddenly, in a very unusual way, this group of people show up in Spindle Cove and are like, hey, guess what? We're your family. You're an orphan? Not anymore. And this guy who she has kind of been known to hate has always never said anything to her, leaves the room when she comes in type of a situation. Corporal Thorne then decides that he suddenly has a very keen interest in her, and the entire book is essentially a wandering meander through everyone experiencing their shared trauma from childhood once again and working it out through becoming a couple. Wasn't wild about this one as much as I have enjoyed other Spindle Cove books in the past. This was a little bit of a letdown, although I was happy that finally we did get to focus on Kate Taylor because it just seemed like they were setting everyone up in the prior books for there to be a book about Kate, and I almost wish there was a little bit more for her, even though, like all good romance novels, this has a happy ending. I don't know that we really needed to like reenact all of her life trauma in order for her to get that. It was around that time that Ali Hazelwood's, I think, first YA book came in off of my holds list at the library. This is called Check and Mate, and it is about 2, I think 18-year-old kids who are playing competitive chess, and one of them is like this lauded world champion who's known for being a dick, and the other one is this girl who apparently has the weight of her family and her mother's chronic illness and all of the bills that come with that and all of the annoying siblings that come with that weighing on her, and a whole situation with her father about how she never wants to play chess again. This has some very classic Ali Hazelwood nods to the idea of STEM and strategy and logic and all of those different pieces while having a very quirky character at its center. This book honestly reminded me a little bit of To All the Boys I've Loved Before, with the pair of sisters sort of having different attitudes towards her, especially the youngest, who's really good at secret keeping, just like Kitty in that book with Lara Jean. I think I would prefer that Ali Hazelwood continued to write for an older audience, but I think this turned out fine. The next book on the docket was one that I received from Bex, I believe for my birthday this year, and that was A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This book, as you can see from the cover, has the 2021 Lodestar Award for Best Young Adult Book and is the winner of the Andre Norton Nebula Award for Middle Grade and Young Adult Fiction. This book is about a 14-year-old girl named Mona who lives in this city that I'm still kind of struggling to grasp what the like governmental structure is, but there's a queen and there's a bunch of guards and an army and a prince, and it seems like there might be an electoral system. It's not really clear how everyone is coming into power. Regardless, she is a baker. She's one of few people with magic. Her magic really only works with bread, and she can bring bread to life, which she does here with this little gingerbread man, and she finds herself being swept up in having to save the entire city from essentially a revolt from within the queen's own army and a coup. The gingerbread man that hangs around with her and carries this little sword is an amazing source of comic relief. So much pressure is put on Mona as a 14-year-old girl, so we're really sort of dealing with that dystopian narrative and children who are forced to take on the load of an entire area where there should be responsible adults. And it's just quite clever, honestly, the things that she comes up with in order to save the city and the town and her friends and all of the other magickers that she meets along the way. Plus she befriends an orphan boy who steals a lot of things for her, and he is a true highlight of this as well. He's always got something hilarious to say, and I appreciated every moment when he showed up. Once again, a great birthday pick by Bex. When does she ever fail? Never at this game. We went back into the romance genre because this came off of my library holds list. This is the other series that I happen to be keen on after having fallen into it from the trap of my Kindle, and this one is, I believe, the fourth in the Clan Kendrick series, The Highlanders' English Bride. We have now worked our way through about half of the Kendrick brothers. There are 7 of them in this series that all wind up having a wife, and this is the first of 2 twins, Graham and Graham, and this is Graham's book about him winding up being a spy and running into this woman who is like the very most perfect English lady of the peerage, and how they're gonna wind up living their lives, and they do this whole thing where they don't like each other, but then they always wind up in situations together. Anyway, it's fine. Vanessa Kelly seems to be doing a thing with all of these books where like, these 2 people are brought together by a situation. That situation is wound up in a wider situation where there is a dark and deep danger happening, and it is up to the brother in the Clan Kendrick. And then somehow this woman that he winds up meeting to deal with that situation. In this case, Graham is a spy, and there are these assassins on the loose, and the king is coming into the city, into London, and so he's got to be there for that. Anyway, all of these books normally wind up with the 2 lead characters, either one or both of them, almost getting murdered in the nick of time. The one saves the other, and this book is no different, spoiler alert. So I'm having a lot of fun seeing across the different novels what are the new ways that she's going to wind up almost killing one of her main characters and making the other one save the other. On my Kindle, I then read Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto, and I'll be honest, I didn't love this book as much as I've liked some of Jessie Q. Sutanto's other work. So this is the same author who did Dial A for Aunties, and I think it was 4 Aunties and a Wedding, and is expecting one more book in that series. I don't know what it was about this one, and I think it was the constant switching of perspectives. So yeah, I do know what it was about this one. It was the constant switching of perspectives and us having little bits of information that the other characters didn't have, which I mean often works great in books. I read a lot of books like that, but I don't know why it didn't work here. I think wanted one character's perspective of the whole thing, but the mystery would not have worked in that regard if we had just gotten that. So lo and behold, multiple perspectives, and then you wound up with almost too much information. Like, I could see how this was gonna all fit together. I also don't know that it was a very good mystery, and I did not necessarily believe like the overbearingness of Vera the way that I believe and understand and can totally see the overbearingness of the aunties in some of her other books. So I guess I was expecting that to be there too, and it wasn't. This was still cute. I would recommend this if you haven't read the other books yet, but you want to get into this author's style of writing. This is a nice intro, but I definitely enjoyed her other series more. During a particularly gloomy period, I then picked up Nevermore once again. I've talked about this book a few times on here. As usual, this was something that Bex gave me for my birthday and I absolutely loved, and it's been going around BookTube I think for a while, but this is a excellent middle grade book. It's one of my, I think, favorite books I've ever read ever. Now harkening back to a situation where the more I like a book, the closer it goes to my face in these videos. Nevermore is about a girl named Morrigan Crow, and she finds herself thrown into a different realm and offered the chance to compete for a place in this magical wondrous society, which is essentially an extremely fancy private school for people with magical abilities or otherwise very practical knacks, K-N-A-C-K-S, being very, very good at one thing. For instance, her best friend is an amazing dragon rider. This is perfect for people like me who enjoyed Harry Potter and then wanted something additional, and I really wish that this had been around when I was in high school because I also think I would have enjoyed it then. I'm delighted to next share that I have finally finished The Library Book by Susan Orlean. I received this for Christmas 2 years ago, made my way 50 pages into it, and then promptly could not finish it. I started listening to the audiobook as a supplement so I could read it more often because, you know, you can't read a book while you're driving a car, and did not enjoy the narration of this at all. Found it terribly hard to listen to. I thought the author just did not have suitable prosody in their ability to read, and it was quite boring. But I also couldn't get myself to pick the physical book back up because by the time I had listened to enough of the audio, I was like, do I even care about this anymore? However, I put it on 1.2 speed, got her going at a good clip, and pushed my way through the end of this book, which is actually a really interesting account of the Los Angeles City Library. So I'm glad to have read this. I think it's interesting. I have my own feelings based on who I think set the fire that is pretty much the central plot point in this piece of nonfiction, but regrettably, I don't think any legal team would ever agree with it. Lo and behold, I don't think I realized listening to it who was reading the book, and turns out it is the author. So Susan Orlean, great writing. I don't know that there's a career there for her as an audiobook narrator. Sorry, Susan. I followed that up with a book that was, surprise, surprise, pushed to me on Libby, and that is You Sound Like a White Girl by Jalissa Arce. And this book was an interesting look into a perspective about existing in the United States as a Mexican American and someone who was undocumented for a period of time and has gone on to achieve great success, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, on Wall Street and in the finance industry. And she discusses a whole lot of the struggles that she went to, on the path to citizenship, but offers a lot of commentary based on those experiences of how she now believes society should be run so as to be more inclusive and more equitable and more thoughtful about people in this country who are not white. I came away from this book with a big feeling of like, yes, and kind of wanting more, because there seemed to be some interesting solutions to some societal challenges that were posited, but thinking about them, I didn't really see any way to deeply follow through to make that happen without like a good 20-year blowing up of the entire structure and society that we have, and refiguring out something new and what we would do in the meantime to get everybody who's already currently in what might be a broken system on a track to making that system better, but also maintaining how far they've come in the broken system. So I don't know how I felt about this book entirely, and if you have read this, I would be interested to hear what you think, what others think about it, because I kind of all over the place with my feelings for it. In February, I got on a plane to the United Kingdom and I read the book Shark Heart, A Love Story by Emily Habeck. And this book is about a man who turns into a great white shark and his relationship with his wife and how it affects their entire lives. This is just set in sort of this alternate reality that is exactly like ours, except for the fact that people happen to turn into animals sometimes, and the medical community is completely aware of this, and they have procedures, and society has set up conditions to make that as humane as possible and to understand how people who are going through those types of mutations can be helped. It was an interesting just take on what would life be if people sort of spontaneously genetically turned into animals. I really enjoyed the depth of emotion in this. I enjoyed the fact that it was very much written like a play. The main character in this book is a high school theater teacher, and so that was definitely a character that I could understand because I've known several theater teachers in my life, so that made a lot of sense to me. I understood his motivations, I think, more than some of the other characters in the book. This was a very complex web of family drama that eventually all came back together, and I thought it was very, very well done. For a book where the premise is this one guy turns into a great white shark, there were members of my book club who said this made me weep so much more than I was expecting to, for the premise being what it was. So if you've read this book, I would also be really interested in hearing what you think about it, because it's such a ride. It's absolutely such a ride. It is sad, it is happy, it is incisive. I really enjoyed it. Along the way, I was also listening to Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, and this is essentially like a revisionist retelling of the story of Medusa. I've seen online, particularly on Goodreads, a number of people complaining that for a book about Medusa, this book doesn't spend enough time actually talking about or following Medusa, which is interesting. And I brought that up to my partner, who is very, very well read in mythology, and he said, well, Medusa doesn't really feature all that prominently in her own story, so that makes sense. And I actually really enjoyed sort of the outside perspectives of everything going on around her while looking in on her relationship and growing up with her Gorgon sisters. Natalie Haynes reads this book as well, and this is a great example of an author who can do a great job reading their own book. Highly recommend that this situation where the author is great at reading their own book. Ordinarily, I love books read by authors, except for in one notable aforementioned case. But Natalie Haynes, I think also as a result of being a comedian, probably has a better understanding of how to present a piece of scripted text. Long story short, great book. Don't expect the whole thing to be about Medusa, and you're golden. It was fabulous. I would absolutely read more things by Natalie Haynes. On my way home from the UK, I made my way entirely through Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is a memoir. Actually, this is an independent bookstore copy that is also signed by Fern Brady. So I saw this when I was at Topping & Company in Edinburgh while I was on my trip and knew it had to come home with me. It was also being very widely publicized in a number of London tube stations. So I said, well, that's more than enough for me. I know Fern Brady because I watched Taskmaster, and I have seen her season and have really enjoyed her ever since. And this book is a memoir about her experience as a woman with autism and how the world is absolutely not set up to accommodate both of those things existing in a positive, successful way. There's almost no barrier in this book to what Fern will tell you. She is very striking and very truthful about her experiences growing up and the way that the world treated her, the way her family treated her, and the ways that she was misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and just sort of disregarded by a lot of people as something that she wasn't because she had not been given her autism diagnosis at the time. It really makes you think. It's brilliantly written, and I would highly recommend it. Then, friends, I went all in and committed 800 or so pages of my life to Sarah J. Maas's Crescent City, The House of Earth and Blood. I have finally done it. I finally read this book. I'll be honest, I only read it because I know that it intersects somewhere along the line with the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I am literally only making my way through these behemoth novels in order to see where that connection comes about. Could I look it up online? Sure, but where's the fun in that? Might as well put myself through these arduous slogs of romantasy before even having an inkling of what's to come, instead of just easing my way into the information on the internet. I am so confused about a number of things in this storyline. I don't understand the language that's being used to describe people who have immortal type of powers or who can make the drop. I don't necessarily understand the house system. I don't understand why people live in certain parts of the city. That feels really cliquey and exclusionary. This also seems to be set in a very technologically advanced time, which is at odds with a lot of the way that some of these types of characters are structured to exist. Confluence between magic and technology doesn't always work, and I don't see it working well here. But here we are. It was fine. I'm reading the second one now because apparently I feel the need to put myself through this. And I really don't feel any particular attachment to either of these main characters. Bryce and Hunt, first of all, what kind of names are these? Second of all, I find them both uninteresting. Like I always say with every fantasy book, I move the goalposts on what makes it good and interesting. But at least you know what? There's no dragons as of yet, so that alone is the reason to keep going. I finished off March with 3 books, the first of which is The Maid by Nita. This book was exceptionally lauded, and it's one of the reasons that I think our book club chose it. It's because a lot of folks have heard about it. It's been really well received. It's been really well reviewed about, wow, what a, like, such an engaging story and a mystery, and how interesting that we get to be in a person's head through the whole thing and experience this through this person's particular world. And then I read one review on Goodreads that really summed up why I was feeling yucky most of the time that I listened to this, because I spent a lot of the time listening to this book kind of feeling like, that doesn't feel right. That feels uncomfortable to me. And I couldn't put my finger on why, and ultimately this person said it best. It's because there is absolutely no nod to the fact that this character is written with just sort of the skimmings of somebody who is autistic. It's like textbook, I'm gonna pull from these 3 areas of autism and create a character, even though I myself am not autistic. I'm going to create this character who has these things that are like just identifiable to a reader, where, you know, they can identify that that person probably fits into that category, but we're never going to mention it. And also, I'm only going to bring it up when it's convenient to the plot. So I don't feel like it was very fairly done. I don't think that this particular mystery really benefited from that attitude. In fact, I think giving Molly a lot of the characteristics that she was given obviously hampered her, but it also hampered her story. She's kind of portrayed as both this incredible intellectual savant who's capable of keeping things from people and having secrets, and then when it's convenient, she's portrayed as this kind of idiot baby who has no experience with the world and needs everyone to translate the world going on around her for her. And while both of those things can certainly be true in the realities of a complex person, for this character, those things came up when it was convenient for the plot, and it really wrecked my enjoyment of this book. It felt yucky, and I will be keen to see if that feedback has been given to the author and whether the author addresses it in the second book, which I understand is now out. I then picked up from my holds list the Highlanders Irish Bride. I won't say that this is a carbon copy of the Highlanders English Bride, which you may remember from earlier in the video, but the lead character in this is indeed Graham, the other twin from the series, and funnily enough, the lady that he winds up with happens to be cousins with the woman that married the first twin at the end of the English Bride, except this one is from Ireland. Boy, is she obsessed with Ireland. Nothing in the world could be better for her than Ireland, and she was ripped away from her Irish heritage and her mother's gardens at 8 years old, and gosh, nothing could ever amount to that. But meanwhile, there is a nefarious plot where somehow people almost get murdered. Ask yourself whether or not they have to save each other at the very end. They do. I really hope the next one is a little bit better, because this was just too similar. Too similar. They spend the whole time thinking that the other one is boring and doesn't like them. And then eventually they're like, oh wait, you seem like you're not boring, and I know that because someone told me. It's like a worse version of the first one without so much presence of the king. And finally, I ended this book with an audiobook that I started I think last year at this time, so it's taken me a year to get through this book, but boy has it been worth the wait, and that is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I will listen to pretty much anything that Marin Ireland reads. This book is narrated by Marin Ireland and Michael Urie, and they're both excellent. Marin Ireland, let me just say her name again, you should read everything that she narrates. I've seen a number of mixed reviews of this book. I really enjoyed it. I could 100% see the ending coming, and actually as I was listening to it, I was like, all right, let's get to the point. Like, the characters need to catch up because the reader is now so far ahead of the people in the book that it's just taking way too long to finally get to the point and come to the conclusion. So I think it could have moved a little faster for the back third, but overall I enjoyed how all of it was woven together. I really enjoyed Tova, the old woman, and I appreciated how somehow there was just this Scottish character thrown into the rest of it who was essentially like a nosy busybody and up in everybody's business, but also being a good guy at heart. And there you have it, 16 books in the first 3 months of the year. Stay tuned to find out how many come in the next 3 months of the year, especially if I can make my way through this second Crescent City book, which is just extremely hard to continuously hold up. We need to find a way to hold up very large books. Maybe I should have gotten it on my Kindle. As always, thank you so much for watching. Everything that you want to know about us is probably in the description, and we'll see you very soon.